Welcome to this video. This is a new part of Endgame Basics and Theory. This is about bishop against bishop with one extra pawn for one side. Yeah, we normally look at it from the white side as it is done in those theoretical discussions. So white has an extra pawn with one bishop each of the same color. Let's look at some typical positions, ways to win this in certain situations, ways to defend. We start with the simplest position of all, the simplest draw for the defender here, black. This is of course a total draw, where you are standing in front of the pawn. You're on the other color than your bishop, like here on a dark square. And black is just shuffling his bishop forever and can never lose actually. You just stay on e7 and wait and wait and wait and never ever can lose. Very simple to understand. It gets more complicated, of course, if you are not getting in front of the pawn, which very often will happen. Let's look at a typical situation where you're not in front of the pawn as the defender. This is a typical situation. The d-pawn now is far advanced, very close to promotion, and the only thing that stops white from winning is of course the black bishop ready to sacrifice itself in case the pawn really pushes to d7. Yeah, the winning idea here is of course quite simple. You need to make sure that the bishop cannot sacrifice, and white needs to offer a bishop trade to fight for the key square on d7. Note that, and this is a key point, black's king is not in front of the pawn, as mentioned right away, but it's also rather far away from this pawn. It takes a number of moves to actually even get near the pawn. That's a very important thing. Oops, not to h7. Cannot jump to h7. Yeah, so how does white proceed here? This is a win. Yeah, this is a win. And the easiest win is with bishop f3. This is a very clear-cut way to win, intending to play bishop c6. The key square actually here to get the bishop to. Black now has no way to avoid that. It is important to see that after, let's say, bishop a4, bishop c6. Yeah, if the bishop now moves away, we are just playing d7. After this, we win the king and pawn endgame. Black goes, let's say here, bishop c6. This is no difference whatsoever. If black tries to do this, king e8, yeah, we can have a look at this again. And again, we will win the king and pawn endgame. Yeah, this is a case where white has a clear-cut win, because this is basically the worst possible scenario for black. Yeah, you're very close to promotion. You don't have the king as black in some sort of defensive role. It's basically the same thing. The king is here or on g1, yeah, let's say. It's not really mattering very much. The king is not doing anything. There is in fact a scenario where black's king being more active makes all the difference. Let's look at this scenario now. Here, this is a quite similar position, but a big difference. The king is on c5. It is in the rear of the pawn, in opposition to white's king, if you want. And what it does is, it always also attacks the pawn. The king here is really playing an active role. And very importantly, it also has a look at the c6 square, which, as we have seen before, is a key square for the white bishop to go to, trying to force a trade of bishops. In this case here, white cannot win. This is a total draw. Yeah, let's look at some ideas. What can white try to do? Yeah, he can try to play this. And of course we're not trading. This is a big mistake. We're just going away with the bishop, because bishop b7 has blocked the pawn. White cannot advance it at the moment. Okay, he can go here, threatening this, and we switch back to this diagonal, again covering the d7 square. How is white going to make any progress? Very difficult. If he stays here, we just keep watching the d7 square. There's simply nothing possible to do. Also note that this attack makes sure that the white king is never moving. Yeah, there's really no way forward. Yeah, white can again go here if you want. Yeah, you go back to e2, and it's a very simple draw. Black is just always observing d7 and has no problem in doing so. In the other situation, the king was just far away, and there also was this c6 square to fight for the advance of the pawn. This is a clear draw. The king behind the pawn in opposition. However, this is not always a draw. It is a draw here, but it can be lost anyway if one of the diagonals is too short. We are coming to this situation now. Yeah, this is a version of the first position, but it is shifted towards the queen side. The difference is that now if we look at the diagonals involved, we see that those diagonals include one that is very short. Yeah, this 3 square long diagonal. And in case of the one diagonal being shorter than 4 squares, so three squares and less, it is normally a win. Yeah, there are borderline cases, but this is normally a win. Why exactly? We have a look at the typical procedure, how white wins in this position. White to move bishop c8. For some reason, I need to switch the right to move. Bishop c8 is the first move. We want to go to the long diagonal. That makes lots of sense. Bishop e4, bishop b7. Bishop d3. Yeah, you have to go away from the long diagonal. If instead black goes to f5, you play here, the bishop has to go to c8, otherwise we push. Bishop c8 and bishop e2. And now we come to a Zugzwang position. This is the problem. In this concrete situation, there is simply no, yeah, if there would be, let's say, yeah, a square near the king, yeah, yeah, like on the 5th rank, something left to the a file, then you could go to b5, to the 5th rank. We cannot. The board is simply ending here. Cannot go one more. And there is no square, yeah. Black is in Zugzwang. If you play something like this, we have bishop a6. And moving the bishop obviously allows the advance of the pawn. If you go to d3, the procedure is quite similar. Bishop f3, bishop a6, bishop g4. And again, Zugzwang. This is too short. Yeah, there is no square like d9 or something like that. And black now is in Zugzwang. Yeah, moving the bishop somewhere here allows promotion. Moving the king is not exactly helpful. So this is a Zugzwang. Yeah, very important to remember. If one of the diagonals is shorter than 4 squares, then the chances of a win increase considerably. Almost all positions are won. There are some freakish cases where this is not the case, but very tricky situations that must be. Okay, let's look at a further example. This is a version of the last position. Now it's an f pawn, not g or b pawn. Look at this. There's a check. White needs to move the king. And it's a rather logical case here where to move the king. There is only one move that wins. This is king g8. It's very important. It's about the short diagonal. This short diagonal, the king needs to control as many squares as possible of this diagonal. After king g8 he wins quite easily. Let's say king g6, bishop f8, and we see that this will win rather simply. Yeah, it's very comparable to the situation before. Possible line is this bishop f8 move. Let's say bishop f4 to be ready to go here. Now we go away. Bishop h6 and bishop b2. We come to the long diagonal and we see that those squares are controlled. And if the king moves now, we come here and actually promote our pawn. King g8 is a very simple win actually. However, if white is ignoring that and goes to e8, it is a draw. King e6, of course. We are adopting this rear opposition. As we have seen before, this is the best defense. Yeah, white now can try, but he cannot win anymore. Bishop f8, bishop f4, bishop b4, bishop h6. Note that this king here is far less effective because it's not controlling those vital squares, the g7 square. Very important. Here's the key square. With the king on g8, not possible. Yeah, and there is really no way forward. Black is holding his control over f8. Yeah, so it's very important in those cases where the diagonal is too short. It is only too short if bishop and king work together on those squares of the of the short diagonal, those squares. Okay, now we look at a different scenario where the pawn is not as far advanced. Yeah, this is a scenario where the pawn is just on the 5th rank, which of course is helpful for the defenders. The more backward the pawn is, the easier the defense. How should black play here to draw? There is a very clear-cut way to draw, which however was not played in this actual position. Kurajika Markland, a game from the 70s. The easiest draw here, not the only draw, but the easiest draw here is in fact not to try to go in front of the pawn, because you won't manage that easily, but to go to this rear opposition. King d5 is the best way to do it. King g6, king e4, and we are aiming to the rear opposition. Bishop c7, king f3, bishop d8, king g4. And this is exactly where we want to be. We have this pawn under attack, so the white king cannot advance. And we are controlling the key square here on f6. There is really no way forward for white. You can always control this square. Note that in this case the diagonals are really long. Yeah, it's a much easier affair. Look at this diagonal than with the pawn on the 7th rank. White has absolutely no way to progress in this position. However, black didn't do that. It's also not that intuitive. If you don't know the method, you probably automatically try to run in front of the pawn to stop it. Yeah, he went king d7 in the game. King g6, king e8. Yeah, this was his idea. Bishop f4, intending to go to h6. Yeah, how can black defend here? There is only one defense left still, and this is to go to g8. Exactly, allowing that. This is in fact still a draw due to the fact that the pawn is still on f5. It is only working due to this fact. Yeah, white has no way forward. We can again check a couple of ways to try it. For example, like this. Yeah, yeah, king and pawn endgame. We lose, but there is no reason to take. We can just stay and ask white, okay, you're on this diagonal now. You're not pushing your pawn now, are you? So he will do something like this. Bishop h4, again looking at this. And the diagonal is long enough, yeah? No problem whatsoever. And white will absolutely not make any progress. Note that if we come to this situation and white tries to offer an exchange here, we can of course trade because we get to the key squares of the f-pawn. White is not coming in front of the pawn. So it's a draw. Only a draw because the pawn is that far back on f5. So this is a frontal, let's say, defense against the pawn in cases where it is not yet advanced that far. Mostly the backward or defense from the rear. Yeah, this is the right word. The defense from the rear is the cleanest way to do it. Like said earlier, this kind of way is the easiest way to do it. Okay, we have seen a number of very typical themes now. Let's maybe look at one final position that helps us to see the points of this endgame again. Yeah, let us look at this position and yeah, sum up some points about it. Yeah, we have a d pawn, which in general is one of the maybe lesser dangerous pawns because of the diagonals being the involving diagonals being rather long. Yeah, let's say a b or g pawn is a bit more dangerous. On the negative side, black's defending king is not in a great position. It would rather be here, of course, to attack it from the rear, as we learned that this is a good thing. So is this a draw? Yeah, it's still a draw, but black needs to be very, very precise and know what he's doing. Let us have a look at some ideas. It is white's to move, and of course white to move, because black to move is easy. You just go to e8 and to d8 and draw. So white is playing bishop h5, the only possible way to try to win this. Bishop h3, we need to stay on this diagonal. What else? Yeah, and now, what are possible tries for white to win? The most dangerous try is king e5. King e5 tries to reach the position that we looked at first in this video. The king is here, yeah, trying to walk over to this square. The other possible idea that we should look at, and let's do this first, is bishop to g6. No, that idea is to force a trade on f5. Black has a defense, however. Bishop d7. That's very important. You can just drop back, and the point is that after bishop f5 we have the good move king e8, and this actually secures an immediate draw. We get to d8 or we get to a drawn king and pawn endgame. That's a very important defensive motif, and the only one that draws really reliably and easily. But as mentioned, the most interesting try is king to e5. What is black's best defense here? Knowing the defensive technique of the attack from the rear, it is pretty easy to determine actually. The best defense here is king to g7. It's maybe counterintuitive if you don't know the idea, but if you know it, it's pretty easy to employ. Now, black is just coming around and basically, sort of pursuing the white king. Something like that, let's say. And we are in the rear of the pawn. You just get there in time and draw. It is really something to rather do immediately and not hesitate too long. If black plays a tempo losing move that's not doing much, then here you're really forced to go king g7. If you're not doing it now, you're too late. If you now go king g7 and you really have lost the complete move, you still will draw. You're just about in time, but really just about here. And you are just controlling this square, but by one move. If you go to g7 one move earlier, it is a bit more convenient. Let's still see what happens if black is not knowing the defensive technique. If he plays a move like that here, he will lose. He is just too late. King c5, bishop b7, king b6, something like that, and we arrive at the winning position that was shown at the start of the video. White will win by using this and this square. Finally it's c6 to push the pawn home. So it's a typical thing in chess. You need all your pieces working to have a good position and a good defense, and in this case it is the black king that needs to come to this rear defense, this situation where you help by attacking the pawn and controlling the important c6 square to draw. So I hope this video will help you in securing a couple of half points, or maybe sometimes a win with the extra pawn in this type of endgame. It happens quite often, and it's very useful to know this defensive method with the king behind the pawn. It's not a very intuitive one. This is why it's so useful to know. Note that this of course is an endgame, this bishop and pawn against bishop with the same colored bishops. This is of course an endgame that a computer with table bases, even without table bases, will play absolutely perfectly. If you want to practice this, just put up some positions against a chess engine on your computer. There's some online resources as well, and then just practice. And see what happens. Just shuffle around a bit and see how the computer evaluates the various positions, and compare positions or enter some positions from this video into the computer and play against it. See if you can win the won positions, draw the drawn positions, and sort of play around a bit. What happens if you switch a pawn from the d file to the c file to the b file, whatever. This is very helpful in learning the ins and outs of the endgame. The goal really should be to come to a situation where you make most of those moves automatically without thinking. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a very good point to start with bishop endgames, something that definitely will be addressed later in this series. I'll step by step go through all the endgame types with simple situations. Next one will be knight and pawn against a single knight, and then we come to the more complex ones, especially rook endgames, of course, where rook and pawn with this rook is really complex and has lots of subtleties that you're are hardly aware of if you just look at it briefly. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.